They ruled by fear, until humanity remembered its wrath. The rain fell on the broken streets of Chicago. Jack Harper walked with his head down, past the crumbling buildings that were once skyscrapers. His uniform was clean and pressed, the small, Varaxian symbol on his chest marking him as a liaison. The humans he passed looked away. Some crossed to the other side of the street. No one wanted to be seen talking to a man who worked with the aliens. Jack didn't blame them. Most days he couldn't look at himself in the mirror either. The Varaxian ship hovered above the city center, a dark mass that blocked the sun for 2 hours each day. Its surface rippled like oil on water. After 97 years of occupation, humans still didn't understand how the ships worked. They just knew what the ships could do. Jack's wrist device buzzed. He was being summoned to the central plaza. His stomach tightened. Public summons meant public punishment. Keep walking, he told himself. Don't show fear. The Varaxians fed on fear. They could smell it, taste it in the air. They didn't need guns or bombs to control humans, they just needed to scare them. The central plaza had once been a park. Now it was mostly dirt with a large platform in the center. A crowd of humans stood in silence, their faces blank masks hiding their terror. On the platform stood 3 Varaxians. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin that shifted colors like the surface of their ships. They had no visible eyes, just smooth skin where eyes should be. But everyone knew they could see. They could see right into your mind. Between the Varaxians knelt a man. Jack recognized him as Sam Porter, who worked in the food distribution center. His hands were tied behind his back and his face was wet with tears. The tallest Varaxian stepped forward. Its mouth didn't move, but its voice filled the plaza. This human kept food for himself instead of bringing it to the collection point. He broke the rules. The crowd stayed silent. Sam Porter looked up at the crowd, his eyes finding Jack's. "Please," Sam mouthed. The tall Varaxian raised a hand. The air around Sam began to shimmer. Sam's eyes went wide. His mouth opened in a silent scream. Then his body just collapsed. Not like a man falling down, like a balloon losing air. In seconds, there was nothing left but empty clothes. "Fear keeps order," the Varaxian said. "Remember this." The crowd began to disperse, moving slowly and carefully. No one ran. Running showed fear, and showing fear attracted them. Jack stood still, his fists clenched at his sides. He had seen this before, many times, but something about Sam's eyes, the way he had looked at Jack, broke something inside him. A cold hand touched his shoulder. Jack turned to see one of the Varaxians. Up close, he could see the tiny ripples in its skin, the small holes where a nose might have been on a human face. "Liaison Harper," it said in his mind. "You are troubled." Jack forced himself to breathe, normally. "No, Overseer, I am fine. Your heart rate is elevated. You are producing stress hormones." "The rain," Jack lied. "I don't like getting wet." The Varaxian's face rippled slightly, a gesture Jack had learned to interpret as amusement. Humans and their physical discomforts. So primitive. "Report to the tower tomorrow for your new assignment." "Yes." "Overseer." The Varaxian moved away, its body gliding more than walking. Jack waited until it was gone before letting out the breath he had been holding. He walked home quickly, through streets getting darker as night fell. The old city power grid barely worked anymore. Only Varaxian buildings had reliable power. Jack's apartment was small, just one room in an old hotel that had somehow survived the initial attacks. He locked the door, then checked the small device hidden under his bed. It scrambled monitoring signals for 10 minutes. Not long, but enough. He activated it, then pulled up the loose floorboard. Inside was a small metal box. Inside the box was an old data drive, something he had found in the ruins of a military base. He had been too afraid to look at it before. But today, after seeing Sam die, something had changed. Jack plugged the drive into his old computer. Files appeared on the screen. Most were corrupted, but a few opened. They were reports about something called Project Prometheus. Jack began to read. Project Prometheus, Neural Pathway Enhancement. Classified Level 10. The file described experiments to enhance human emotional responses, to amplify them, control them, use them as weapons. Jack read until his scrambler device began to beep, warning him that time was running out. He quickly hid everything and sat on his bed, heart pounding. Across the city, Dr. Susan Miller stared at the brain scan on her screen. She worked in the Varaxian Research Facility, studying human biology for her alien masters. But what she had found today wasn't in any of their research parameters. The scan showed a small region in the human brain that seemed dormant, suppressed. Susan had run tests on hundreds of human subjects, and they all showed the same pattern. This part of the brain was being actively blocked. She switched to older scans, pre-invasion medical records that had somehow survived. The same region in those old scans was active, vibrant with neural connections. "What are they hiding from us?" she whispered to herself. A sound at the door made her quickly switch screens. Her supervisor, Bill, stood there. "Working late, Susan?" "Just finishing up the cognitive response tests," she said, trying to sound casual. Bill nodded. "Make sure you take your supplements. There's a new batch, overseer's orders." The supplements. Every human took them daily. "For health," the Varaxians said. Susan looked at the small blue pill on her desk. "Thanks, Bill. I'll take it now." She waited until he left, then slipped the pill into her pocket. Instead of swallowing it, she would add it to her growing collection. She needed to analyze them. As she shut down her computer, Susan couldn't stop thinking about that dormant brain region. It seemed to be connected to emotional regulation, emotional amplification, the same area that, according to old medical texts, lit up during states of extreme fear or extreme rage. Outside, the rain had stopped. Susan looked up at the Varaxian ship hovering over the city. For the first time in years, what she felt wasn't fear. It was curiosity, and a tiny spark of something. The Varaxians had worked for nearly a century to extinguish hope. They ruled by fear until humanity remembered its wrath. The grand hall sparkled with cold light. Hundreds of humans stood in neat rows wearing their best clothes. It was the day of gratitude when humans thanked the Varaxians for their protection. Jack Harper stood stiffly in his liaison uniform, watching the Varaxian High Commander Zelix address the crowd. "Your fear keeps you safe," Zelix's voice echoed in everyone's mind. "Fear prevents violence. Fear maintains order." Jack's eyes scanned the room, noticing the blank expressions, the careful control everyone maintained to hide their true feelings. His gaze stopped on a woman with dark hair pulled back tightly. She wasn't looking at Zelix. She was looking at Jack. After the ceremony, Jack moved carefully through the crowd. The woman appeared at his side. "Liaison Harper," she said quietly. "I'm Dr. Susan Miller from the Research Division." Jack nodded politely. "Doctor?" "The weather station predicts rain tomorrow," she said. Jack froze. That was a code phrase from the old military files he'd been reading. A phrase used by resistance fighters before the final defeat. "I hear the rain helps the flowers grow," he responded with the counterphrase, his heart pounding. Susan's eyes widened slightly. "We need to talk, but not here." She slipped him a small piece of paper. "Tomorrow." The next day, Jack made his way to an old maintenance tunnel beneath what was once a university. The tunnels weren't monitored because the Varaxians hated confined spaces. Susan was waiting with another man, tall and thin with nervous eyes. "This is Paul Grant," Susan said. "He works in communications maintenance." Paul nodded. "I can scramble signals. Give us privacy. For a little while." Jack looked at them both. "How do I know I can trust you?" Susan pulled out a small vial of blue pills. "These are the supplements we're all forced to take. I've been analyzing them. They contain compounds that target specific parts of the brain." She paused. "The same parts mentioned in your Project Prometheus files." Jack stared at her. "How do you know about that?" "Because I found the missing pieces," Susan said. "The Varaxians aren't just feeding on our fear. They're making sure it's all we can feel strongly. These supplements suppress other emotional responses. Paul nervously looked at his watch. We have 17 minutes before the signal cycles, Susan quickly continued. The Varaxians need our fear. It's not just control, it's food. But human brains can produce other emotions just as strongly. Emotions that are poisonous to them. Like what? Jack asked. Rage, hope, determination. Susan's eyes were bright. I've developed a compound that temporarily blocks their suppressants. It lets people feel everything again. Jack thought of Sam Porter, the man he'd watched die. The way his body had simply collapsed as the Varaxian fed on his fear. What happens when people take your compound? He asked. They remember what it feels like to be human, Susan said simply. Fully human. 3 weeks later, Jack sat in a small room with 5 other people. They had been carefully selected, people with reasons to hate the Varaxians but with enough self-control not to act rashly. It will last about 6 hours, Susan explained, handing each person a small red pill. You'll feel things intensely. It might be overwhelming at first. A woman named Karen took her pill first. She had been a child when the Varaxians came. She had watched her parents' fear being harvested until nothing was left but empty clothes. Jack swallowed his pill with water. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then warmth spread through his chest, rising to his head. Colors became brighter, sounds sharper. I feel... He started, then stopped, unable to find words. Everything, Susan finished for him. You're feeling everything. Memories flooded Jack's mind. His parents. His childhood before the invasion. Training in the last human military. But instead of the dull ache these memories usually brought, he felt them with stunning clarity. Grief, yes, but also love. Pride. And something hot and powerful he hadn't felt in decades. Anger. Across the city, in the central Varaxian tower, Zilix felt something disturbing. A ripple in the emotional field it constantly monitored. Fear was the steady background radiation of human cities, always present, predictable, nourishing. But for a moment there had been a spike of something else, something bitter and burning. Increase surveillance in Sector 7, Chelix ordered. And double the supplement dosage in the water supply. Back in the small room, the 6 humans were experiencing their first taste of emotional freedom in years. Some wept, some laughed. Karen simply sat with her eyes closed, her face a map of complex feelings. We need to be careful, Susan warned. The Varaxians will sense strong emotional changes. We need to spread this slowly, carefully. How much of your compound do you have? Jack asked. Enough for about 50 people, Susan said. I need specific chemicals to make more, and they're hard to get. Paul raised his hand. I can help with that. I have access to the supply schedules. Jack looked around the room. 6 people. It wasn't much of a resistance. But for the first time he could feel something beyond fear or resignation. He could feel purpose. Over the next month, their network grew carefully. A supply manager named Joe began diverting small amounts of chemicals. A woman named Mary, who worked in water treatment, helped Susan test different delivery methods. Jack used his position as liaison to gather information about Varaxian movements and vulnerabilities. Each person who took the compound was carefully vetted and prepared. The Varaxians began to notice subtle changes. Fear patterns were shifting. Some humans were becoming resistant to fear projection. Security measures were increased. Punishments became more severe. But something unexpected was happening. When humans witnessed these punishments while under the influence of Susan's compound, they didn't cower. Their fear transformed into something else. It transformed into resolve. In his apartment, Jack studied the Project Prometheus files again. The project had been shut down just before the Varaxian invasion, deemed too dangerous. Scientists had discovered that human emotions could be weaponized, amplified, and directed. But they had focused on aggression, on making better soldiers. They had missed the bigger picture. He looked up as Susan entered, her face tense. The Varaxians are bringing in specialists, she said. They call them fear casters. They can generate terror so intense it can kill instantly. How many people have taken the compound now? Jack asked. 43, Susan replied. But we're ready to expand. Paul managed to get the chemicals I need. We need to test something, Jack said, showing her the files. According to this, emotions can be directed, focused, like a weapon. Susan studied the files. Theoretically, yes. The brain can be trained to channel emotional energy. Then we need to start training, Jack said, because soon we won't just be hiding from them. He looked out the window at the Varaxian ship hovering over the city. Soon, we'll be fighting back. In the darkened research lab, Susan carefully mixed chemicals. The new batch would be stronger, more refined. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear but from excitement. For the first time in nearly a century, humanity had found its weapon. Not guns, not bombs, but the very emotions the Varaxians had tried to take away. They ruled by fear, until humanity remembered its wrath. 6 months passed. The resistance group that Jack and Susan started had grown carefully. Now over 200 humans had taken the compound and joined what they called Wrath Remembered. They used a simple flame symbol to mark safe meeting places. Joe, the supply manager, had created a network that moved chemicals and medical supplies across the city without raising alarms. Mary from water treatment had found ways to hide their activities from Varaxian sensors. Paul kept their communications secure, but most importantly, Karen had been training people to control their emotions. Don't fight the fear, she told the group gathered in an underground room. Feel it, accept it, then transform it. 20 people sat in a circle, eyes closed, practicing. Jack watched from the doorway. These were former soldiers, police officers, and others with combat training from before the invasion. They would form the first strike team. Susan approached Jack, her clipboard held tightly against her chest. The new compound is working better than expected. Effects last nearly 12 hours now, and there are fewer side effects. Good, Jack said, because we're almost ready for the first test. The plan was simple but dangerous. A small Varaxian outpost on the edge of the city was their target. 5 Varaxians managed it, monitoring human activity in the outer districts. The team would surround the outpost, and instead of attacking physically, they would project their emotions. Not fear, but rage, determination, and hope. Nobody knew exactly what would happen. The Project Prometheus files suggested it might temporarily disable the Varaxians. Susan's research indicated it might do more. 3 days later, at dusk, 50 humans took positions around the outpost. They had no weapons. They didn't need them. Jack gave the signal. Each person took the compound, waited for it to take effect, then focused their emotions as Karen had taught them. The effect was immediate. The Varaxians inside the outpost began moving erratically. One stumbled out the door, its skin changing colors rapidly. It made a high-pitched noise no human had ever heard before. Keep focusing, Karen called out. The humans intensified their emotional projection. Some thought of loved ones lost to the Varaxians. Others focused on the future they wanted to build. All channeled their emotions outward toward the outpost. 2 more Varaxians came out, moving as if in pain. Their normally smooth movements were jerky and uncoordinated. One collapsed to the ground, its body rippling violently. Then, something unexpected happened. The fallen Varaxian's body began to shrink, to collapse in on itself, exactly the way human bodies did when Varaxians fed on their fear. They're dying, Susan whispered in shock. Within minutes, all 5 Varaxians had collapsed. Their bodies shriveled away to nothing, leaving only empty robes on the ground. The humans stared, in silence. For nearly a century, Varaxians had seemed invincible. Now they knew the truth. Download everything from their systems, Jack ordered, breaking the stunned silence. Then we need to move. Quickly. As they gathered the Varaxian data devices, a young man named Pete looked at Jack. We killed them. We actually killed them. Jack nodded. They've been feeding on us for generations. Turns out we can feed on them too, or at least our emotions can. News of the successful attack spread through hidden channels. More humans volunteered for treatment and training, despite Susan's warnings about the risks. The compound wasn't perfect. Some people experienced brain damage or heart problems. A few had died, but many more were willing to take the chance. The resistance symbol, the simple flame, began appearing on walls across the city. High Commander Zelix was furious. The loss of an outpost was unprecedented. The data feeds showed something impossible: humans, projecting emotions other than fear, and those emotions somehow attacking Varaxian bodies. Find the source. Zelix ordered its subordinates. Find who is responsible. The Varaxians began public executions again, more brutal than before. They selected humans at random, hoping to re-establish the climate of fear they needed. But something had changed. Many humans who witnessed these punishments didn't respond with terror. They watched silently, their faces showing nothing. Some even looked directly at the Varaxians, an act of defiance that had been unheard of for generations. Back at the Resistance headquarters, Jack studied the data they had taken from the outpost. Most of it was encrypted, but Paul had managed to unlock some files. According to this, Jack said to the leadership group, the Varaxians have called for reinforcements. Elite fearcasters are on their way from their home world. How many? Karen asked. 30, Jack replied. They'll arrive in 2 weeks. Susan looked worried. Their fear projection will be much stronger than what we've faced. Our people might not be able to resist it. Then we need to strike before they arrive, Jack said. We need to hit their central communication hub, cut them off from their home world. The plan took shape over the next few days. The hub was in the center of the city, heavily guarded. They would need more people, more of the compound. Susan worked day and night, producing as much as she could. Karen trained larger groups, teaching them to direct their emotions with precision. Jack worried it wouldn't be enough. The Varaxians were growing more aggressive, more desperate. They had increased the dosage of suppressants in the water supply. More human patrols were on the streets. One evening, as Jack was reviewing maps of the central hub, Susan entered his room. Her face was pale with exhaustion. I've been analyzing the Varaxian biology from the data we stole, she said. I've figured out why our emotions affect them so strongly. Jack looked up. Why? They don't just feed on fear. They convert it into energy their bodies can use. But other human emotions, especially strong ones like rage or hope, they can't convert them. These emotions are like poison to them. Jack thought for a moment. So the stronger the emotion, the more damage it does. Susan nodded. And there's something else. The fear they take from us doesn't just feed them. It makes them stronger. Their abilities grow with each feeding. Which means if we can cut off their food supply, Jack started. They get weaker, Susan finished. But we have to act fast. Once those elite fearcasters arrive, they'll be able to generate so much terror that even our trained people might break. Jack looked at the map again, at the central hub where the Varaxians coordinated their activities across Earth. It was heavily guarded, but now they knew something important. The guards were getting hungry, and hungry predators made mistakes. 3 days later, as dawn broke over the ruined city, 500 humans gathered in secret locations. Each took Susan's compound. Each had been trained by Karen and her team. Today, humanity would remember its wrath, and the Varaxians would learn to fear. They ruled by fear until humanity remembered its wrath. The central communications hub stood in what was once downtown Chicago. It was a tall black tower with no windows. Varaxian guards patrolled outside, their movements smooth and confident. They had never been attacked here. They didn't expect to be. Jack watched from a building across the street. Through binoculars, he could see the guard's skin shifting colors in the early morning light. Beside him, Karen checked her watch. Everyone should be in position by now, she said. Jack nodded. Let's hope Susan's calculations are right. The plan was their most ambitious yet. 500 resistance members had taken positions in a wide circle around the hub. Unlike their first attack on the small outpost, this time they would project their emotions in carefully timed waves. First fear, to draw the Varaxians' attention and make them feed. Then, when the aliens were distracted by the feast, they would switch to the emotions that harmed them. Jack raised his radio. All teams, report. One by one, team leaders confirmed they were ready. Jack took a deep breath and gave the order. Begin Phase 1. Around the hub, humans who had taken Susan's compound began focusing on their fears. They remembered losses, pain, and humiliation. They projected these feelings outward, toward the hub. The effect was immediate. The Varaxian guards became alert, their heads turning to locate the source of this emotional surge. More Varaxians emerged from the building, drawn by the prospect of feeding. They're taking the bait, Karen whispered, watching through her own binoculars. Inside the hub, Shelix felt the sudden wave of fear. It was stronger than anything it had felt in years. Suspicious, it ordered a scan of the area. Source appears to be multiple humans in the surrounding blocks, a subordinate reported. Fear levels are unusually high. Shelix hesitated. This could be a trap. But the fear was so strong, so tempting. Send guards to investigate but maintain security on the building. Outside, Jack watched as Varaxian guards moved toward the sources of fear. Phase 2, he ordered into the radio. Now, the circle of humans shifted their emotional focus. The fear faded, replaced by a complex mix of rage, hope, and determination. Each person focused on specific memories, loved ones lost to the Varaxians, dreams of freedom, the satisfaction of fighting back. The guards stopped in their tracks. Their smooth movements became jerky. Several fell to their knees, their skin changing colors rapidly. It's working, Karen said. But there are more guards than we expected. Jack frowned. The hub's security was stronger than their intelligence had suggested. They needed to get inside to access the communication systems. Tell Team 3 to move in, he ordered. 50 humans broke from their positions and ran toward the hub's entrance. They wore the stolen uniforms of human workers who served the Varaxians. As they approached, they projected emotions designed to confuse and disable the remaining guards. Inside the hub, alarms were sounding. Shelix felt the shift in emotional patterns and understood immediately what was happening. It's an attack, it announced. Activate the fear amplifiers. Throughout the building, devices designed to enhance Varaxian fear projection powered up. Wave after wave of terror washed outward. Jack felt it hit him like a physical blow. Even with Susan's compound in his system, the fear was overwhelming. His hands shook, his vision blurred. Beside him, Karen gasped. Keep going, Jack said through gritted teeth. Remember the training. He focused on his anger on the memory of Sam Porter dying in the plaza. The fear receded slightly. Team 3 had reached the entrance but was struggling against the amplified fear. Several members were on their knees, overcome. But others pushed forward, their faces set with determination. We need to help them, Jack decided. Karen, you're with me. They left their observation post and ran toward the hub. Jack radioed the other teams. Maximum projection. Give everything you've got. 500 humans focused their emotions with all their strength. The air around the hub seemed to shimmer with invisible energy. Inside, Varaxians began to collapse. Their bodies, overwhelmed by the toxic emotions, started to shrink and fold in on themselves. But Shelix, older and stronger than the others, remained standing. It reached for the building's control panel and activated the emergency protocol. Outside, Jack and Karen reached Team 3 just as the hub's doors opened. A group of Varaxians emerged, including the most terrifying sight Jack had ever seen. 3 tall figures in flowing red robes. Fearcasters, Karen whispered. They've arrived early. The Fearcasters raised their arms. The wave of terror that hit the humans was unlike anything they had experienced. It was pure, concentrated horror. Several resistance members collapsed, instantly their hearts stopping from the shock. Jack fell to one knee, his mind filled with nightmarish images. But even as fear threatened to overwhelm him, he remembered Susan's words. Fear can be transformed. With enormous effort, he channeled his fear, directing it inward and then changing it, reshaping it into fierce determination. He looked up at the fear casters and did something no human had done in decades. He smiled at them. The nearest fear caster hesitated, confused by this unexpected response. In that moment of uncertainty, Karen and several others followed Jack's example, transforming their fear into defiance. They moved forward step by painful step. The fear casters increased the intensity of their projection. More humans fell, but those who remained standing kept advancing. Jack reached the nearest fear caster and looked directly into its featureless face. He projected every non-fear emotion. He could summon love, hope, courage, and most of all, rage. White-hot, searing rage. The fear caster made a high-pitched sound and stumbled backward. Its skin rippled violently. The other two fear casters focused their projection on Jack, trying to break him. Jack felt like his head would split open. The fear was beyond anything he could have imagined. But deep inside, something remained unbroken. A core of humanity that remembered what it was like to be more than just afraid. For Earth, he gasped and lunged forward. His body collided with the fear caster. There was no physical attack, just emotional connection. Jack poured everything he had into the alien. Grief, love, hope, and wrath. The fear caster's body began to collapse in on itself, just as human bodies did when their fear was harvested. But this process was faster, more violent. Within seconds, nothing remained but empty robes. The other two fear casters retreated toward the hub. Karen and the remaining team members followed, projecting their emotions like weapons. Jack staggered to his feet. Through the open doors, he could see the hub's central chamber. And there, surrounded by dying Varaxians, stood Zelix. The High Commander looked directly at Jack. For the first time, Jack felt something he never expected to sense. From a Varaxian? Fear. Zelix was afraid. Of humans. Jack smiled again and stepped through the doorway. They ruled by fear, until humanity remembered its wrath. The inside of the hub was cold and dark. Screens covered the walls, showing different cities around the world. In all of them, Varaxian ships hovered in the sky. Jack walked slowly toward Zelix, who stood by the main control panel. "You cannot win," Zelix said in Jack's mind. "Our ships will destroy your cities if the hub goes offline." Jack felt the alien trying to push fear into his mind, but after facing the fear casters, this attempt seemed weak. "You've been feeding on us for almost 100 years, Jack said. "That ends today." More resistance members entered the hub. Karen moved to a control panel and began working to access the systems. Paul had taught her how to find and disable the communication links. Zelix raised its arms. The air around it shimmered with power. "Even if you kill me, the ships will still follow their orders. Humans will die by the millions." Jack stepped closer. "Maybe, but you won't be alive to see it." Outside, the battle continued. The remaining fearcasters fought against the human teams. Many humans had fallen, overwhelmed by the intense fear projection. But those who remained kept fighting, kept focusing their emotions. Susan arrived with a second wave of resistance members. She carried a device she had built from Varaxian technology they had captured. According to her calculations, it would amplify human emotional projection. "Set it up in the center of the circle," she ordered, "and everyone link hands. We need to connect our emotions." The humans formed a ring around the hub. Each person held the hands of those beside them. Susan activated her device. It hummed softly, then emitted a pulse of energy. Inside the hub, Jack felt a surge of strength. The emotions of hundreds of humans flowed through him. He faced Zelix without fear. "Your ships need constant guidance," Jack said. "We've studied your technology. Without the hub, they can't target specific areas." Zelix's skin rippled with anger. "Then we will destroy everything. Earth will burn." You need Earth, Karen called from the control panel. You need humans. We're your food source. Zilix moved with sudden speed, gliding toward Karen. Jack intercepted it, projecting his emotions directly at the Varaxian leader. Zilix stumbled but kept moving. Stop the hub shutdown, it commanded. Karen worked faster. Almost there, she said. Jack grabbed Zilix's arm. The touch of the alien's skin was like ice. Jack focused all his emotion into the physical connection. Zilix screamed. The sound was not in Jack's mind but in the air, high and terrible. The alien's skin began to change colors rapidly, cycling through patterns Jack had never seen before. You are food, Zilix hissed. Nothing more. We are human, Jack replied. And we remember our wrath. He pulled Zilix closer, embracing the alien in what looked almost like a hug. Jack's body shook with the effort of channeling so much emotional energy. Every memory of loss, every moment of hope, every dream of freedom. He poured it all into Zilix. The Varaxian leader's body began to shrink, but unlike the other Varaxians they had killed, Zilix fought back. It pushed waves of terror into Jack's mind. Images of Earth burning, of humans dying in agony. Jack accepted the fear. He let it flow through him. Then he transformed it. Just as Karen had taught them. Fear became anger. Anger became purpose. Purpose became power. Done, Karen shouted. The links are broken. On the screens around the hub, they could see Varaxian ships wobbling in the air. Without guidance from the hub, the ships were operating on basic programming. Zilix made one final effort. It reached into Jack's mind with all its remaining strength, searching for his deepest fear. It found the memory of his parents dying, their bodies collapsing as Varaxians fed on their fear. You will join them, Zilix promised. Jack didn't resist the memory. Instead, he focused on what came after, his years in the Resistance, finding the Project Prometheus files, meeting Susan and the others, finding hope again. My parents died afraid, Jack said. I won't. Zilix's body convulsed. Its skin turned gray, then began to fold inward. The process accelerated until nothing remained but empty robes on the floor. The High Commander of Earth's Varaxian forces was dead. On the screens, the ships were rising, moving away from the cities. Without the hub to coordinate them, they were returning to orbit, following emergency protocols. Karen looked at the control systems. We can send a signal to all human settlements. Tell them what happened here. Jack nodded, still shaking from his encounter with Zilix. Do it. Outside, the remaining fearcasters had fallen. Susan's device had amplified the humans' emotional projection beyond anything the Varaxians could withstand. The survivors were gathering around the hub, many, injured but alive. Susan found Jack in the central chamber. Are you okay? She asked. I will be, he said. What about the ships? Will they attack? I don't think so, Susan replied. From what we've learned about their biology, the Varaxians on those ships will be starving without access to human fear. They'll need to return to their homeworld. And if they don't, Jack asked, then we'll be ready, Susan said. We know how to fight them now. Over the next few days, word spread across Earth settlements. Humans learned about the fall of the hub, the death of Zilix, the retreat of the Varaxian ships. In some cities, remaining Varaxians fought desperately against newly formed resistance groups. In others, the aliens fled to their ships. 1 week after the battle at the hub, Jack stood on a rooftop, watching the last Varaxian ship rise into the clouds. The sky was clear for the first time in decades. Karen joined him, her arm in a sling, from injuries sustained during the fight. They might come back, with more ships, more fearcasters. They might, Jack agreed, but they'll find a different world waiting for them. Already Susan's compound was being produced in large quantities. Cities were setting up training centers where people could learn to control and direct their emotions. The knowledge from Project Prometheus was being studied by scientists around the world. What will you do now? Karen asked. Jack thought about it. For so long, his life had been defined by resistance, by fighting against the Varaxians. Now humans needed to remember how to live without constant fear. "I think I'll help rebuild," he said. "There's a lot of work to do." Below them, in the streets, people were gathering. Some were singing, a sound that had not been heard in public places for generations. Children played without looking over their shoulders. Adults spoke freely, their faces expressive. "They took so much from us," Karen said softly. "Not just lives, but our humanity, our ability to feel." "And now we have it back," Jack replied. As the sun set over the damaged city, Jack felt a complex mix of emotions: grief for those lost, pride in what they had accomplished, hope for the future, and yes, still some fear of what might come next. But that was okay. Fear was part of being human, just not the only part. Humanity had remembered its wrath, and in doing so, had remembered everything else that made them human.